Good morning and welcome to this week's press conference by our group. I hand over to our group president Gianni Pittella.
Grazie, buongiorno a tutti.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you one and all. Today I'm going to talk to you about two different issues which are particularly close to my heart, and then I'll be happy to take questions. The first one is Hungary. Hungary is a serious issue for us in terms of democratic principles here in the European Union. The Socialists and Democrats have been courageous enough to stand up and state this clearly and to say that Hungary is going in the wrong direction, in the direction of illiberal democracy, and we decry this. Others, the EPP, have actually defended Orban. There will be a resolution voted tomorrow in the Parliament, and it will request that the Council evaluate the status and situation of democracy in Hungary and whether the current situation can be deemed in line with the principles of the European Union and compliance with Article 7 and implementation of the principles thereof. We are going to request that the reference to the European University in Budapest is removed. This question of the drift towards a liberal democracy in Hungary and the developments in Poland, we feel require the establishment of a permanent monitoring mechanism to ensure compliance with the fundamental principles of democracy. We cannot allow any further deterioration in terms of compliance with the principles of democracy, which are such a valuable principle, and therefore we need to focus each and every battle on defending to the hilt the principles on which democracy in our society are founded. And I deeply regret the fact that a political family which subscribes to the values of the European Union, such as the EPP, will not embrace the principles of the debate, the battle we are fighting with us in the self-same way. If any member of our group behaves in a similar way, we are perfectly prepared to stand up and denounce this behavior. We are prepared to stand up and be counted because we feel that you have to tackle a virus and eradicate it at the root when it first comes to evidence, because otherwise it becomes contagious and it can affect the entire democratic society of the European Union. And therefore the people of Europe need to wake up. We need to realize that there is now an increasing awareness of the serious nature of the Orban phenomenon and what is going on, and we need to tackle this drift towards illiberal democracy, and we cannot let anybody get off without holding them to account in a very robust fashion. The second issue is Turkey. I've just come back from there with some members of my group. I met the president and two brothers. Who are closely related with this group, the political party there. I met judges, I met magistrates, I met individual citizens, members of civil society. And I also attended a hearing where evidence was taken from Mr. Demirtas. It was supposed to be a hearing where evidence was accumulated against him. He's actually in prison and he's being charged with terrorism and other crimes. Now, this hearing took place in the Palace of Justice and it actually lasted 5 minutes. And it basically simply served to defer the legal proceedings once again. And therefore, the situation is that in Turkey, cases are deferred sine die, and thousands of your colleagues are charged. Thousands of magistrates, of advocates, of journalists are thrown into jail. They don't even know what they're being charged with. They don't know why they're in prison. And it is unacceptable that people are imprisoned on trumped up charges or charges that are not even presented to the person who has been arrested. Now, please, would you make this some of your headlines in your papers, because we have to denounce this sort of trend towards illiberal democracy. I was in Ankara. There were hundreds and thousands of people who were demonstrating against the arrest of thousands of men and women who had been clapped into jail, even sick people, older people who've been denied medical care. They've been clapped into jail. And I was absolutely astonished. I find it absolutely terrifying. It gives me the shivers to see that there are people with small children in pushchairs who were on hunger strike, and there was a lad of some 30 or 35 years who had lost an arm. I was honestly horrified by what I saw there. I was horrified. And when I spoke to him, he said that his arm was cut off in prison. And he showed me that this was done by a dog. He showed me a photograph of it. This is something that happened in a prison in Turkey. But these are things that honestly just affect your humanity, your perception of society, humanity and civility so deeply. Where is human dignity here? Where is it? We need to have a minimum of a basis of legality in that country. And we went there precisely in order to say this. We're prepared to keep open the path towards the European Union on the basis of democracy. But if you're going to chuck people into jail and they're not going to have a proper constitution, 1% was the margin by which this constitution referendum was allegedly won. And there are reports of huge irregularities. And the referendum campaign was run on the basis where there was no proper entitlement to express your views. If you were against the referendum, you were not able to express your views in a free way on a level play field. And we're basically seeing a drift towards an authoritarian presidency and illiberal democracy there too. And this is incompatible with the European Union keeping open the path to Europe. And therefore we as socialists and Democrats are determined to condemn this. We feel that we've got to keep the way open to Turkey towards Europe, but we equally feel that we are absolutely obliged, we are left with no choice but to suspend negotiations if all these sorts of acts and actions don't stop. And I'd like you to print this, I'd like you to shout this from the rooftops, because I feel so strongly about it and I was so struck and so upset by this.
So,
thank you.
From your side, we start with you and then David.
Yes, hello, Pascal Zens from Agence Europe. May I ask my question in English? Is it fine? In French, sorry.
Yes, on the resolution on Hungary, do you believe that the resolution will be supported by a number of delegations within the EPP? Do you have some hope in having a significant support from parts of the EPP? Second point. Still on Hungary, are you in favour of, in the future, linking structural investment funds in the cohesion policy to compliance and respect for rule of law, as certain colleagues have indicated? Thank you. I would hope that the whole EPP group will vote in favour of the resolution. And I appeal to Mr. Weber, set aside group-related interests and those who are members of it, and give pride of place to the interests of Europe here. Now, we have to see the positions of our colleague Fizzo. And, we have to stigmatise certain positions, and I think Mr. Weber's courageous to do so, and I would certainly appreciate it if the motion for a resolution has support, if not of the entirety of the EPP, that a large number of them, there were, if we have the Greens, the Liberals, and the GUE, I would certainly hope that they, in addition to them, we will find EPP voices in favour of our resolution, because we're talking about this drift to illiberalism, and we need to look at Article 7, also to examine the issue of the funds. We must do everything possible to avoid Orban continuing down this road. And And let's not forget Poland either. The situation in Poland deserves our very close and very stringent attention. Thank you.
David Carretta, Radio Radicale. Se permetto...
If you'll allow me, from Radio Radicale, I'd like to ask you about the meeting yesterday between Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron in Berlin. Above all, the end of this taboo on any change to the treaties. Do you consider that to be a positive move? Secondly, in the view of the S&D group, these ideas on the table, not so much Euro bonds, but the shared responsibility for the budget to provide further funds for investment. Do you view that as positive or not in relation to the past? Thank you very much. Now, I'd like to be absolutely clear about this. Now, the fact that the Franco-German machine is moving forward again is positive. And I think that, you could say that if it were an exclusively Franco-German relationship, that might not be so positive. And so it has to be a point of cohesion, not exclusive in nature. Now, if you're talking about a move from dual speed to single speed, that's the German speed, has to be examined as well. We have to recognise that Europe is made up of more players, including Italy. They're European countries. And indeed, if you look at all of those who want to be part of this, they must be able to be. And if somebody says, on the one hand, getting the budgets sorted out again and putting together a budget at a European level is one thing, but on the other hand, you might have some vague, generic intentions of advocating growth. Now, I'm not so happy with that. Now, I could support the idea of a European finance minister, but you're talking about European management of the budget, and alongside that, you have to have a set of measures, including increased fiscal capacity and the launch of Eurobonds. Those points are vital. They hang together. You can't, just share restrictions and austerity. You have indeed to ensure that the public finances are on a sound footing and have a proper policy of investment for growth and jobs. Otherwise, I would be against such creation. There's a question on the same subject, and then afterwards Turkey.
Oui, bonjour.
Yes, bonsoir. Two subjects I'd like to come back to briefly, if I may, sir. I'd like to come back briefly to Hungary and then David's question on the euro. On Hungary, apparently the line of thinking of the EPP is to say that the Commission has launched these procedures for breach against Hungary. Let's let them run to the end. And if at the end of the day Hungary's response is not satisfactory, then we would trigger Article 7. What do you think of that approach? And then when it comes to fiscal capacity, a very straightforward question. We talk about fiscal capacity, but for the citizen, the fiscal capacity means increasing taxes. Obviously, there are structural and technical aspects of the matter, but if you're talking about a fiscal capacity for the Eurozone, does it mean the possibility to raise additional taxes? And if so, how are you going to explain this to the citizens when the time comes? Well, the position of the EPP group is pretty timid, is reticent, waiting for the Commission. Things are on the table already. What else do you need to wait for? Orban came to the chamber. You heard what he said. And frankly, it was a real problem. Now, he's trying to turn himself into a victim figure. And what was it he was talking about? Millions of refugees threatening the country. But that's crazy. If you've got an individual, a president who closes down a university, comes to the parliament, doesn't even accept the invitation from the majority of parliament to go back to basics, to allow that university to continue in its existence, what can you say? Orban refused also to put into place the plan for resettlement of refugees. And you're talking about refusal to take account of any of these refugees at all. So that's Orban for you. And do we hear any word breathed about this by the EPP to criticise that behaviour? Well, when it comes to the fiscal capacity of Europe, yes, having it run at European level, fine. But I think Eurobonds do mean that we have fiscal capacity. But it's not just enough to share our debt with adequate guarantees for those countries that have particular concerns. Eurobonds would mean looking at a financial programme for investments. I mean, we have the financial markets available, and we're looking at, the possibility of, $1 billion a year, which can be put into a genuine European programme for growth. And if I have to explain to our citizens what fiscal capacity and investment means, it means having the necessary finances for a genuine programme to modernise Europe, to fund major infrastructure, material and immaterial, to fund research, to ensure we have sustainable development. That's going to create jobs in Europe. That's going to give us a boost to growth, rather than seeing people drift into fear and dislocation and people losing their faith in Europe.
Turkey, I assume?
Yes, Mr. Amelie. President Pittella, after your visit to Turkey, what would your message be? What would you say to Council and Commission in the light of what you saw and heard? There's a union of the opposition in Turkey, and particularly thinking of the HDP and the CHP. Have you had any specific proposals from those parties that you would support? Thank you. I asked both of our sister parties to come together, because given the state of emergency in Turkey, I think it's just not justifiable for them to stand alone. They have to set aside their differences and pool their efforts to create an alternative to Erdogan. That was my message. And it seems to me that the two movements closest to us have understood this. At least they told me that they had understood the message and they would work in that direction. So that was one point. Now, today and tomorrow, I'm going to meet Ms. Mogherini, and I will tell Vice President Mogherini what I heard there, and what we're covering in this press conference, that we need a strong initiative from the European Commission, yes, but I would also turn to the whole international community. Erdogan is trying to close himself off, And we can only hope to change things if we have a significant response from the entire international community.
One more, and then we have to close. Then we take this one outside.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pittella. A brief comment, if I may, on the situation of the Socialist Party in France. Could you comment on that after the elections, how this might impact your position in Europe? Well, the group has examined the implications of the French elections in depth. It's always the case for elections. And as far as we're concerned, we can't say we're satisfied with the results achieved by Mr. Hamon, Benoît Hamon. But it's wrong, it's politically incorrect to say that the outcome of election in one round in a country is the death knell of socialism. No. I think what happened was wrong. I think the declaration made by former Minister Valls was wrong. Now, socialism is an ideal. It's a system of values and principles which is international in nature. It's not something that is purely confined to a single state. And if there are problems, they have to be understood and overcome. But I think that socialism lives on. We have to combat injustice. We have to fight for freedom and justice. And certainly we need to breathe fresh life into socialism. This is a European and an international movement. It's relevant to today's societies, and we have to update our response to globalization. Now, the free market and globalization are not unalloyed good things. They also create losers as well as creating winners. And so we have to look at that aspect too. And we have to look at what people need and what people deserve. And those are part of our values. That's the kind of society we wish to represent.
Outside, if useful. Merci.